I don't know that it's necessarily, Neil, to say don't have a plan B or don't plan at all, but just know that plan B is probably never going to be as good as you think it is. Just adapt and overcome. You'll make it.
All right, so we have Jason Duncan, the real Jason Duncan, not to be confused with any other Jason Duncans, on the call this morning. Welcome to the call, my friend.
Glad to be here, Neil.
Good. Well, we're going to have some fun combo today. I think you and I have hit it off in a very short time frame, and I really appreciate the friendship that's growing between us and the business and things we're doing. And we're going to probably unpack a little bit of that today as we talk about mostly you, as we feature what the real Jason Duncan is doing. So give everybody, we'll give a synopsis real quick, and then I want to dig into you and your own words, as opposed to me just reading a boring script about your life, because I know it's more interesting than stuff we typically read on paper. But in simple terms, Jason helps people specialize, specifically entrepreneurs, in how to exit their businesses without selling them. So that sounds like a pretty fascinating topic for the day, I think. So let's unpack that second, but let's start real quick with you. Jason, tell everybody a little bit about you. Who are you?
So born and raised in the Nashville, Tennessee area. My wife and I both were born and raised here. She actually lived in Nashville proper, and I lived in the suburbs just north of town most of my childhood. And we met on a blind date when we were 15 and 16 years old. Pretty much been together ever since. And it's been a phenomenal life. Married to my best friend. We have got 2 adult kids, 19 and 21. And I spent the first part of my years as my professional career as a pastor, and then as a school teacher, and then an accidental entrepreneur about 11 years ago. So that's when life thoroughly changed for me and for my wife and for the kids. Everything changed in 2010 and 2011.
Wow. So that's just a recent big change. So I forgot that you were the pastor. So that your evangelist comes out. Now I recognize
I don't know
where that person coming from now. I wouldn't necessarily put you as a preacher, but I would definitely call you an evangelist, which is a bit different. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, how did you drive from that to this? Like, where was it? There was a change in there. Something big happened.
Well, I spent 13 years. So my senior year of high school, I started working in the youth ministry program at my home congregation, and continued to work in youth ministry for, I guess, about 7 years. And then I went into preaching, so I moved from youth minister to senior minister, however you want to refer to that. And, but during most of those years, this is my bridge into business. Most of those years I spent doing insurance sales. I sold health and life insurance to small business owners as a way to supplement my ministry income. Because a lot of those years I was working part-time or bivocationally, as we refer to it in the ministry, where you have 2 vocations, one in somewhere else and then one in the ministry. The last, I guess, 6 years of my ministry career, I was pretty much full-time working as a pastor, leading the congregation. But for me, I got to the point where I just got tired of it. I got tired of the machine of institutional Christianity. I got tired of kind of running something. And it was more business than it was what I thought what we should have been doing. And not to get too deep into the
No,
church.
that's okay. You go anywhere you want to go.
Well, I felt like I was behind the curtain, and, I was pulling the strings and doing the whole thing like the Wizard of Oz. Now, that doesn't diminish the fact that there was a lot of good things going on. I just didn't like to be that guy. I just felt like that Jesus was calling us to make a bigger difference in a better way. And for me, I couldn't continue in ministry. So I made a decision. I started praying about it with my wife. It's like, what are we going to do next? And school teaching seemed to be the place where I could go to make a big difference. And that's when I went back to college, got a master's in education, and started teaching school immediately after that. And man, that was that was up to that time. That was the best thing I'd ever done. I loved it. I was fulfilled. I taught 8th grade American history. My students loved me. They performed well. I had great relationships with the administrators and parents and other teachers. It was like, this is what I was made to do. Okay. I would still be doing that today, and you and I would not know each other. But in about 2010, 2011, coming out of the Great Recession, the school district where I worked and really everywhere they were going through terrible budget cuts. This is a crisis of just money all dried up through the crisis of the Great Recession. And my principal came to me and said, "Hey, we need to talk." And this was, it was obviously a very difficult conversation for him, but he's like, I know you're one of the best teachers we've got in the county. Your test scores are higher than any other teacher in your subject area. But, he didn't say this, but your last guy hired, you don't have tenure and I have to make a cut. And this is the way I have to make the cut. And that's what happened. So the following school year, I did not get my contract renewed. And so I became an accidental entrepreneur. Now, that wasn't my first choice. I thought, well, I'll go teach somewhere else or I'll go get a corporate job. But, ultimately, I guess that entrepreneurial bug down deep inside just kind of rose to the surface at the right moment and gave myself a deadline to make something happen and got the company off the ground. And I beat my deadline by 3 days, closed the deal on August the 12th. And my deadline was August the 15th. So I made it happen.
There you go, man. Dude, that's an incredible story. So it does resonate now with me, the teacher in you. And I didn't understand that part of your background. I know you've probably mentioned it to me in a lot of things we've discussed in a short period of time. But as we were part of the cohort group together now, I can see how that resonates with your teaching style. Could you explain a little bit more about what you're teaching in terms of people learning how to sell their businesses without selling them? How did you jump from that to teaching and suddenly into exiting and managing exits?
So for me, when I started the company, my company back in 2010, 2011, I started it based on the fact that I knew how to sell. I had been a very good salesperson in the insurance world. And I thought, well, what could I sell? What do I think is hot? What's going to sell for large dollar amounts? And what's a low barrier to entry, right? So I picked, at the time, LED lighting. And I built a pretty significant multimillion-dollar business in LED lighting. I went from unemployed school teacher to millionaire in a pretty short period of time. And life changed and I built this great business. But what happened to me is 7 years in, I found myself trapped by the success. I was trapped in the daily operations of the business. I was trapped by the fact that I had built a business that centered around me, and I was playing the hero of the business. There was a big ego kick out of that, of course, as most entrepreneurs would maybe not admit, but certainly it's true.
The true ones will, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we love being the middle of everything, and I had built that business, and I was the middle of everything, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what triggered me. There wasn't an event, but at some moment about 7 years in, I thought, this is not the way I pictured this going. Sure, I didn't really think I was ever going to own a company, but now I own a company. I'm making a lot of money. I'm providing a great service. I've got great employees. Team's great, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I don't want to be the guy in the office every single day doing this. So how do I get out of this? And as most people might think, well, we'll just sell the business, right? Just sell it, have a big liquidity event, walk away. Well, the problem with that, as a lot of entrepreneurs will know, if you're listening to this, they'll know, well, if you haven't prepped your business for sale, it ain't really worth a lot because you haven't done the things that you do to get it prepped. It's like putting your house on the market without staging or cleaning or anything else. And by the way, putting your house on the market, staging, cleaning is a lot easier.
Yeah, don't take pictures with dirty clothes on the floor, right? Because I've seen those too. Don't let your dirty laundry out.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to do with your books. There's a lot of things to do with systems and processes. So again, another happy accident in my life. I discovered over the next 18 to 24 months how to design the systems and processes and all of the things that go with that to exit myself from daily operations without selling it. So what I figured out how to do is, how do I keep the financial benefits and all the tax benefits without the need to be the operator? And I figured that out, and I called it exit without exiting. It wasn't a thing. It's just what I referred to what I did. And then I went through this terrible identity crisis. Like, okay, now I'm not in the office every day. Well, who am I? How do I introduce myself? What do I put on my business card?
Well, how do I define this new person, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about perseverance, agility, adaptability. I mean, traditional standards of entrepreneurial life, figuring out what you don't want to do as you're still trying to figure out what you do want to do, right? Which is a common theme in entrepreneurs.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs go through that and they're not prepared for it. And I certainly was.
No, they don't acknowledge the change. The change is the biggest fear so many, don't adapt to, but you did.
Well, I think our ability to adapt will always outperform our ability to plan. And I just adapted to it. But here's the thing. I hired a coach because I certainly believe in coaches, and I hired a coach and I hired this advisor, and we sat down and like, who am I? What do I do? How do I? And what we discovered is that I knew my superpower was teaching. I knew that, but I didn't know how to execute that except in the classroom, because I'm certainly not going back to the classroom. I had this illusion early on in my entrepreneurial career that I could go back to teaching at some point, but that was
Fallback
a
position, right?
delusion, not an
Yeah.
illusion. But I thought, well, how do I exercise my gift of teaching without being a pastor? Because I ain't going to do that anymore. Without going back into school as a classroom teacher, I'm not going to do that. Well, I've got all this information about how to build a business, how to scale a business, how to enjoy a business. And then, of course, this exit without exiting thing I pulled off is kind of cool. And then that just kind of morphs, like, that's the thing. That's what people want to know how to do, that I uniquely am qualified to teach people to do. And now that's what I do. So I started a coaching company. I started teaching people how to do this. And lo and behold, people are like, sign me up. I'm interested. This is great. And I'm starting to see entrepreneurs live that life of, I call the exit lifestyle. They're enjoying their life. They're enjoying their business. That's how I got to this place. And so that's all happy accidents, and it's all fantastic.
Well, not necessarily. Look, you said something I want to pull out here that's important, I think, for people that are listening. We had talked about this in our podcast earlier about the intrapreneur versus entrepreneur and the differences between the two. And I want to draw that out again because of what something you said a minute ago about, your plan to go back was not just an illusion. It was a delusion that you would go backwards to teaching. When your success, and the success I would attribute to many of the people I know who are good entrepreneurs, is that they never thought that there was a plan B. That plan B was no longer in, the hindsight. They were looking forward. They weren't in the rearview mirror. And so you were always moving forward. Where I see a lot of unsuccessful, people who are in the intrapreneur, which, to define that, as we've talked in the past, is somebody who's doing something right now to try to become a full-time entrepreneur, a self-made person, their own business. Maybe they're at a W-2 level and they want to try something on the side and hustle and they want to get going, or they're trying to figure out some combination of business activities that will take them into their lifestyle by design, as we refer to it. But you were always moving forward. And there was no plan B. And that's a very succinct thing I want to pull out, because I know my most successful friends and entrepreneurs never went to the fallback. But I see so many people who want to try something. Like, I want to try this thing. I want to get a coach. I want to try that thing. I want to do short-term rentals. I want to do e-com. I want to do broker. I want to do something. But they always think there's some sort of fallback. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I understand the wisdom in having a plan B or having a fallback. You got to have, and certainly there isn't a problem with having a plan B. And certainly I don't even think that planning is a problem. You should plan. That's, as a matter of fact, on my podcast, I talk about the 5 P's of success. And the 5th one is plan. So I understand that plan is a thing, but I said this earlier and I'll say it again. Our ability to adapt will always outperform our ability to plan. And so that doesn't mean you shouldn't plan, but you should embrace the fact that you can and will adapt better than if you'd have planned to go through it. And I'll use this example. If we go back 24 to 30 months ago and our world history pre-pandemic, and we look at, if somebody had showed up and said, okay, I'm from the future and I'm telling you that this is going to happen, these lockdowns are going to happen, there's going to be this vaccine thing, there's going to be masks, there's going to be social. If they'd have said this is all going to happen, and they'd also said, and by the way, X number % of businesses are going to be closed and not allowed to open, it'll be illegal, plan for that. Now, could some people have planned for it, maybe made a go at it? Perhaps. But the reality is, you and I both know that our ability to adapt to this as it happened to us outperformed anything we might have planned ahead of time. Because you take a piece of data and information. Okay, this didn't work, so I'm going to do this. All those fine tunes as we go through our life, whether it's in health, relationship, business, spirituality, those little pieces of data of failure. We fail and we take that piece of data. Okay, that didn't work. I'm going to do this different this time. That ability to adapt and move through things will always outperform your ability to plan. And I believe that. I think that's a universal law that God wrote into the universe. It's a law of adaptation, as you call it. But the entrepreneurs need to embrace that. So I don't know that it's necessarily, Neil, to say don't have a plan B or don't plan at all. But just know that plan B is probably never going to be as good as you think it is. Just adapt and overcome. You'll make it.
No, very smart. And again, not having a plan B per se, or having a fallback, to clarify what I said a minute ago, isn't the concept that, as you've very succinctly said and wisely said, It's the idea, I think, that too many people focus on the plan B when they should be adapting to what's happening in front of them right now. And to give you an example of what I saw a couple of friends who were dentists. One actually did something about the fact that his business had to close down and he couldn't take patients. And he was looking for ways to adapt in order to keep things moving and keep things going forward. And again, adaptation, right? He was just trying to figure it out. He didn't even have a plan. The plan really at this point was try to figure out how to adapt to make a plan and then change it again to make another plan and change it again. But he was willing to do that. By the same token, I had another friend who was also a dentist, didn't do any of that and just sat it out for 12 months. And I'm like, what? And I had this conversation with him. And at the end, it was kind of a mindset thing, frankly, that he wasn't wanting to do those things. And it was objection after objection after objection. Can't do this, can't do that, can't do this. And I said, well, I'm all out of ideas. I'm all out of ideas for you. You're going to have to just figure it out. But really, two people, same industry, totally different mindsets.
Well, it's
literally what it got down to.
It's the great culling. The people who are going to make it are still in the game. The people who weren't are called out. They just did it faster than they would have done otherwise. And not that I would have wished that on anybody, but that's what happens. I mean, I will butcher this quote, but there's this quote about how great times make weak men make better times, hard times, and hard times make great men, or something. There's this circle of things. Very and
we're make times much harder. Yeah.
I think we're at the end, hopefully, of this hard time that we've all been dealing with. And I think the great entrepreneurs among us have risen to the top, and they're doing some pretty amazing stuff. And I'm honored to be a part of that community. And I truly believe with all that is within me that entrepreneurs are the ones that change the world. It's not as much as I would like to believe that it's teachers and pastors and parents and everybody else, because I'm all of those things or have been. It's entrepreneurs, because everything we do in life can be traced back. The enjoyment, the experiences, the health and the wealth and the wellness of our world can be traced back to entrepreneurs taking risks and innovating things that make our lives better. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. And so you've got some really big things you're working on now. Let's talk about those. Obviously, the cohort's a big component. Let's talk about that. Obviously, you're venturing into some new things that you're looking to do in the coming year as you sort of adapt and kind of evolve your business. Let's unpack a couple of those, would you? Talk about the cohort first.
When I exited the daily operations of my business, I actually didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew that I was going to keep getting paid, but I knew that I'm not the kind of guy to sit around and not do anything. So what do I do to occupy my time? So I started a few businesses. I started an e-commerce business, dabbling in that. And you and I know we've talked a lot about that because that's kind of your specialty. Started a lending company to kind of lend money, short-term hard money lending for business investments, real estate investments. I started obviously my coaching and consulting company. So I started these different things to see, what would work, what I like to do. And the thing that I spend most of my time on now is my coaching and consulting business. And as you said, that the center anchor of everything that I'm doing is an exit accelerator. The exit accelerator, I do it in a cohort format, which is a 12-week no more than 12 entrepreneurs at a time, where we meet 8 times by Zoom over those 12 weeks. And we go through the 4 things that I did to exit my business without selling it to a third party. So what I'm doing is I'm just relaying that information and the things that I did. These are best practices. Neil, if you do this, you will be able to do what I did. Now, if you don't have to do what I did, but you have now the option to do what you want to do. So that exit accelerator is the anchor point of all that I teach people to do. And then around that, I've built kind of this ecosystem. There's just a monthly membership model where if if it's a financial implication that you have financial implications that allow you to invest in the accelerator, well, maybe $55 a month, you can invest that, and you can get me live once a week, where I'm just doing some live coaching, just on different topics, where you can log in and just watch me coach live and interact that way. And on the other side of that, I've got a mastermind that I'm starting. Actually, probably by the time this thing releases, it'll be active, but called the Exiter Club. And it's going to be a year-long experience for people who want to figure out, how do I live the exit lifestyle? And Jason, now that you've taught me the steps in the accelerator, now I want to live it out. And I want to be in close proximity to other people doing the same thing. I want to go on cool trips and do great events with people that are all in the same mindset. So those are the things that I'm doing inside the community of everything exit. That's what I'm focusing on.
Fantastic. Yeah, you and I are going to jam on that here. We've got the e-commerce side coming up, and I'm excited about that to give people an opportunity to understand the differences in e-com, because a similar model we have in Voltage is how to exit people from their businesses without actually exiting them. So that's where we bring some synergy together here, which is fun. And so in part of that, there's a new venture you're doing. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing. This is a new thing for you. Talk about adaptability, right?
The reason you and I got in, I don't even remember how we got introduced to each other, but whatever
Somebody got us introduced. Yeah.
Well, whatever it was, I've got the e-commerce company, an Amazon store that my wife and I started back, I don't know, a while back. It was after my exit, and I was trying to figure out, how do I train my apprentices on how to start a business? And this e-commerce idea, I thought, well, this would be something we could start. And we started. It didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to. It's longer and harder because I was doing it bootstrapped without any help, no outside assistance, no coaching. I was just doing it by myself, which are all the worst ways. Well, certainly without a coach is one of the worst ways to do something like that. So I did it without a coach. If I'd had you in Voltage, probably would have already made a couple $100,000 in profit. But as it stands, I have not made that this year on that company. But what we're doing now, my wife and I have made a decision that this e-commerce thing, even though it didn't work out the way we thought, and it's still going okay, we really like the model. I like the model because it doesn't, in a lot of cases, it doesn't require a lot of your time. It doesn't require a lot of energy. Certainly doesn't require, in a lot of cases, again, a brick and mortar facade or a building or anything like that. Certainly there may be warehousing involved, that type of thing, depending on what you do. But we like the model, and we like the fact that you can essentially automate it if you build it correctly and use the right mechanisms. Now, certainly to promote what Voltage does, part of what you guys do and what we're talking about doing with you is purchasing an existing company that's already killing it in the e-commerce space, taking over that company, putting in my personality and systems and processes, but letting maybe you guys or, somebody else run it, where it's essentially mailbox money. It's not where I have to be involved on a day-to-day basis, but, I go down to the mailbox and I pull out a check, so to speak, and there's money in there. And that's what I'm wanting to do, because I still love to teach and coach, and I will continue to do that as long as Father God allows me to continue to do that. But I don't necessarily want that to be the thing that pays the bills forever. I want other businesses to do it, which is why I have multiple businesses.
It's fascinating, the approach that you take to that. And I love it. And that's one of the things why we're here to talk about you, because you're unique. You are the real Jason Duncan.
That's right.
Any final words you'd love to give everybody? Some advice, some sage wisdom from the hills of Tennessee?
Well, I would like to say this. I just got off a call before I got on this podcast with you, with another guy who does kind of what I do. He has built and sold a lot of companies, and he has had some pretty amazing exits, but now he's training and teaching people how to do it. And so we'd never met before. That was our first phone call or Zoom call. We're talking to each other. And what was interesting about what he and I, our perspectives, now that we're on the other side of successful builds and exits, we're both now, he's done it with more zeros on the end than I have. He's been very successful with that. But as we sit on the other side of this, we both say our goal is to help entrepreneurs build that business so that they don't have to wait until that liquidity at the end. And so if you think that as a young entrepreneur that it's going to require 100 hours sleeping at the office, work, take no salary, just pour it all back in, just hoping that one day you can exit and make a big payday. Certainly that's a story we hear all the time, but it doesn't have to be that way. Absolutely doesn't have to be that way. You can build the business today that lets you live the exit lifestyle. Keep the tax benefits, keep the financial benefits, keep the benefits of business ownership in general, without working yourself to the bone and without having to be there. I mean, it doesn't have to revolve around you. That is possible, 100% possible. And dude, if I could go back 10 years when I started my company, I would have built it differently. Would it still be turned into a multimillion-dollar company? I think so. Would it still be recognized nationally in magazines for being one of the top companies? I think it would have been. Would I have had a lot more free time to travel and do things that I wanted to do? You better believe it. So it is possible to build it. It's called the exit lifestyle.
Fantastic. Well, Jason, thanks for sharing that, man. Your story is amazing, from preacher to teacher. to business coach to consultant to, mailbox money guy. I'm looking forward to what the future holds and hanging out with you in person here and sharing some Tennessee whiskey one of these days.
Yes, sir.
When we get a chance to get together. Blessings on you. Thank you and I'm honored that you joined it. Everybody check him out, The Real Jason Duncan. You can see it online. He's not hard to find, or come over to Voltage DM and we'll put you in contact if you want to learn more about what he's doing to help people exit businesses without exiting. Jason, thanks a lot for your time today, bro.
Thank you, Neil.